Welcome back to the weekly movie and TV roundup. Now, this week I am very sick, but I don't want to miss a week, 2 weeks into the new year. So we'll do this regardless. There's also a ton of movies to talk about and TV shows as well. So without further ado, let's just knock this one out nice and quick. First up, the worst of the week. I know Jacob Elordi has been on a run for quite a while with Zachary Quinto here. It's a bit of a miss in He Went That Way. Loosely based on true events, a story about an unlikely road trip. There's also a monkey involved, or an ape. It's just very bad, tonally all over the place. And yeah, that one went straight to rent on VOD services on digital. Next up, over on Prime, we got Roleplay. Yeah, this is just it's just not working. It's like generic in all the ways that you'd expect, like a professional, a hit woman here who has to keep that part of her life hidden, and then it just plays out as generically as a couple of weeks ago, that one Mark Wahlberg thing that I've already forgot about. It wasn't Family Switch. There was another generic thing that was on Netflix with Ed Helms. Family Plan, that's what it was called. This is basically the same thing, but I guess they're dating in this one. Really uninspired and just quite bad, but it's streaming on Prime. Netflix, Lyft. This is like, you know, someone lifts something from a store, means they steal. This is exactly that, of like a bunch of different other properties, like mostly I'd say Fast and Furious, but just without any charismatic people in it enough to carry it. It's just like very empty and glossy, and it's just nothing really there. And yeah, Kevin Hart can't really carry this movie at all. A background movie, but hey, it's #1 on Netflix this week, but it's pretty shit in my opinion. The Marvels is not on Disney Plus. I think it is available to buy or to rent right now. Another letdown in this category. Same goes for Next Goal Wins. That's I think a Searchlight Picture production. Also not on streaming yet as far as I'm aware. But you can rent it right now, or you can buy it, or I don't know. It's out digitally. And it's also very bad. Taika Waititi, really big miss. Some people liked it. I just found it really dull, unfunny, and yeah, just pretty bad. And then lastly, out on PVOD, so that means you can only buy it at the moment, I think, for like $20, is George Clooney's The Boys in the Boat. And the boys are in the boat and they're rowing. There could have been like 20 different directors who could have done this. It's not really anything original that comes from Clooney as director. No, I haven't really been a fan of any of his directing anyways, but there's nothing really here. I think it's really bad, and I think the movie has like one of the worst ending quotes to a film ever, where like one of the guys in here, the main guy, is like retired. A slight spoiler here, is like an old guy. He has like a grandkid with him. He asked, were there like 8 people in the boat with you rowing? And it's like, he goes, no, we were all just one person. It's so dumb. That's The Boys in the Boat. But let's get to some better stuff that came out this week. Now, only marginally, I didn't want to put this into the same category as The Bricklayer last week, but The Beekeeper is so bizarre from this poster alone. Like, the overdone, basically you have 2 elements and they kind of mesh together by something breaking apart from a person. I've seen that a lot with like animals that can fly, basically. There's a bunch of that with birds as well. But The Beekeeper, program that's called The Beekeeper, but he, for some unbeknownst reason, is also a beekeeper in real life when he doesn't need to be, because it's just the name of the program that he was a part of. But I guess it's also very literally. Jason Statham fucks some shit up in his film. I guess you get that. I guess you get some action, but it's really cut up action. It's not very well staged or choreographed, in my opinion. It's a bit bloodier than you'd expect, but it's ultimately like really dumb. And not really in an entertaining way, sometimes in a quite dull way. But there's worse things out there. So it made it into the decent category. True Detective Night Country, I'm a bit disappointed that I can't really put this higher. It's also a fair point. Like, this could very marginally also be considered best. But I was just kind of having quite high expectations for the series. And unfortunately, it didn't really grab me that much with the characters. It felt kind of repetitive, the beats that they go down, without having basically a narrative reason why you do it over and over again. There's a ton of potential in some characters that I would have loved to have seen more of, like the cop kid, for example. That whole relationship, and I thought that like the Central 2 here ultimately didn't give me enough to be completely invested in the actual mystery that they were uncovering. I think the mystery part of it was also a bit lackluster, and it is really hard to make that setting work, as it's like perpetually just dark outside. But you could also use that to your benefit, and sometimes this show does, but sometimes it's also like it's quite slow. But yeah, a good watch. If this were ranked, this would be at the very last bit of decent, right before best. But hey, it comes up here because it's a series, I guess, and I put this in like that. And next up is Ted, the prequel series, and it's just not really my type of humor. It also doesn't really work as this period setting because it also has that modern lens to it, but it wants to do the jokes of that era, but with a wink. And that's okay. It's just like very, like Ted is used in a very annoying way to me, where he basically flip-flops what his personality is all the time. Basically it's just for the bit. Ultimately, that would be the best case, but that's not really happening. It's basically just like sometimes to be the voice of reason, and that's like the ridiculous part, that like the Teddy is. It didn't really work for me as a comedy off-rob, but it's also like not like a huge miss. I think it's like decently entertaining. And apparently it's already the most watched original Peacock series. I don't know what other series Peacock made. I can't think of any at the top of my head, but I guess it's something going for it. Out in limited release in the States is The Settlers, Chile's official entry into the Academy Awards. I don't know if it got shortlisted, but caught this one back in Cannes, and I can recommend it. It's a slow film. It's a brutal film. It's a historic film. Made me interested more in the history of Chile and like reading up on that. I haven't done a ton of that. I could have definitely done more, but I think there's something there to grab onto. But I probably wasn't the best audience for it. But hey, if it piques your interest, it's very well made. It's also like the cinematography is also quite stunning, similar to Society of the Snow, using that kind of landscape with mountains sometimes, and it just looks really nice as well. Napoleon, this is out on premium VOD right now, so that means only the theatrical version is available. Later on, when it comes to Apple TV Plus, we should hopefully get that longer 3-4 16-hour director's cut. I don't know how long it's going to be and how much we'll get and when we'll get it. For now, you can see Napoleon outside of a theater. Next up, this is we're jumping all over the place. This comes out in Switzerland. I don't know. I didn't see that A Brighter Tomorrow. Il Sol d'Avenir, this Italian film by Nanni Moretti, has a US release date, and it's probably like because it's so auteur-centered art house thing and Italian coded. I don't know how wide a release it's going to get, and if it pops up on streaming and I see it, I'll highlight it again. But this was my first film by Nanni Moretti, and he's like this very self-referential filmmaker that also acts in his films. And it took me a while to warm myself up to the comedic style and the narrative storytelling devices that he uses. But ultimately, I think it's quite entertaining. It's not the worst thing. It also was like dragging in parts and like really demanding my patience, and I don't know if I had it all the way through, but hey, Nanni Moretti, I think it's probably got a pretty solid filmography. I wouldn't know, I've only seen this one so far. Fremont, now this is I think it's still in theaters or something. I guess it's now out on Movie in the US, if I saw that correctly. It's sometimes so all over the place to like see where something comes out. I hope this is all correct. A small movie about an Afghan woman who becomes a fortune cookie writer, basically. There's also a credit to Jeremy Allen White in it, and it's basically a cameo. I don't know why they made him second billing in this. I guess it's because he's famous. Yeah. By the way, congrats on the Emmy wins, I guess, that the Bears snagged up for the first season even. Weird stuff. Jake Johnson's debut feature, Self-Reliance, premiered at Sundance in 2023 and is now streaming on Hulu. And I think it packs enough jokes, humor onto its very silly premise of a guy who needs to, I guess, not be alone for a month to not get killed in like this really sick game that people on the dark web are playing with him. The premise is so ridiculous, and the moments that come out of it are quite funny. It is a premise that, like, ultimately, There's an issue of it becoming stale at one point, but I think it balances that quite well. Yeah, funny film. Now, apparently, the animated DC slate is not over yet with the DCEU and, oh my god, the horrible Aquaman film. Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1 starts off this, I guess, bigger 3 or 4-part event, now 3-part event for the Tomorrowverse. I wasn't aware that it was called the Tomorrowverse. I think I've seen a bunch of the animated ones. I think this is like there's such an incredible amount of characters in this that I was like quite overwhelmed for people who like really like this stuff. It might be like a cameo fest that they appreciate, but yeah, it didn't really work for me. I think there's way better animated DC movies, but I think the storyline can be quite fun. In this one, we have the Flash at the center of it all. I don't know if he'll be like the main protagonist for all of 3 of these movies or if it will swing, but it also ends with like a pretty big cliffhanger as well. And I don't know when we'll get the next one. I just kind of saw that this is out. I caught it, but it's decent. If you like this stuff, you'll probably enjoy it as well. The Animal Kingdom is now out in Swiss theaters. That's why I'm bringing it up. I think it does have a release date, or at least a limited release date in the US on March 15th. And it's basically the premise of like, hey, there are these mutations for people where they partly turn animal, and what that means for the constructions of society when they are like now shunned outside of it all because they are different. And I think it is a unique enough story about this without just like only pointing to the parallels to our own world, but it also kind of constructs a nice dynamic of a father and a son. It's a French film. It played in Un Certain Regard at the Cannes Film Festival, and yeah, I think it's just very solidly made overall. Got some nice visuals, some great prosthetic work, especially. That's that. Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, the Apple TV show that started back, like, I guess 10 weeks ago on Apple TV Plus and has now concluded. I think it had a really innovative use of 2 actors when you got the father and the son with Kurt and Wyatt Russell, I think is his name, to basically have him play the younger self and kind of the timeline is not converging, but basically telling a larger story over over decades. It ultimately gets to go into the smaller character bits that some people hate with the US-based Godzilla stuff. It takes away from the big bad, big monster just battling it out. And this gets to focus solely on that. The first 3 episodes, really solid. Then it just like completely falls off the map for like 4 or 5 episodes. And then the final 3 are actually like really good again. So I wouldn't know where to put it. I think at one point it is like in best categories, then it goes straight down to worst. And so I landed somewhere in the middle for this one. If you like the Godzilla stuff, if you like the Godzilla stuff, I think it's decent enough. I wouldn't just recommend it for just the characters in that universe alone, although they start off intriguing. And yeah, I don't know if it closes in the most satisfying way possible. And then finally, The Color Purple. You can also go buy that one on premium VOD on digital right now. I just thought this movie didn't work at all in the musical parts. It basically is like, I know it's adapted from a book onto stage now to the screen. This is a Spielberg movie that I haven't seen that's without the musical part of it. I think so, at least. It's just like, this fell flat, like fully for me. I think there's enough tech stuff, there's enough good acting in it to kind of carry it. There's also like decent singing, although I thought the story didn't work for me the way that it was adapted. Maybe the book is better. It didn't work for me. I didn't completely hate it, but for someone who can enjoy a good musical, it did leave me a bit underwhelmed. But let's get to the best stuff of the week. And kicking it off over on Apple TV Plus are the 3 hours and it's not 18 minutes, it's about dry grass. It's 3.5 hours. I think it's 3 hours and 28 minutes or something like that, of Killers of the Flower Moon. One of the Oscar contenders that's looking like it's gonna be nominated for a bunch, but then basically do The Irishman and an Irish goodbye to not the Oscar nominations, but the Oscar wins. That's just what I'm predicting right now. But it's a really well-made movie, now out on streaming, so you can maybe chapter it in a way where you watch it in 2 chunks, maybe 3 chunks. I think it kind of lends itself to that at your own time, basically. I think it's worth seeing though. The first of the 3 theatrical re-releases for some of Pixar's films that never saw the cinema light. After Onward was basically the cutoff right after, like, that premiered, but then the cinemas closed. We got Soul, Luca, and Turning Red. And in the next 3 months, they'll all be out in US theaters, maybe also in some places internationally. Disney obviously dropped them without an extra surcharge, like in comparison to what they did with Mulan, or I can't think of any other movies right at the top of my head, but they released a couple with like a $20 or $30 price tag to it, and didn't do the same thing with Disney. And it's basically them raking in to hopefully profit of the huge loss that they had in 2023. And I think Soul is probably the best Pixar film in the last 6 years. I think Coco is better. That's back all the way back in 2017. None of the other ones, I think, have even come close to being as good as Soul. Elemental didn't work for me. Turning Red was all right. Lightyear was decent. Luca was decent. Onward I liked because I had a connection to it. But Toy Story 4, Incredibles, all just like, nah, you can pass on them. But Soul is actually really solid. So this one deserves the shout out. And I'd love to see it on the big screen as well. But it doesn't look like it's going to be out for me, at least. So go give it a try if you can. But something that everyone can go see right now is out on Netflix with the brother son, Michelle Yeoh. I think she's quickly being typecast as the mother who sometimes also knows to fight. In this one, a bit less. But I thought the brother son was just like a really fun showcase for a bunch of action. It does struggle a bit when it needs to counteract all of that action and all of that fighting, when there's character moments where they like evolve and maybe they want to fight less, but you still want the entertainment of the fighting. Like, what do you do? And it struggles with its identity a bit there. But other than that, I think it's a really funny show as well. Like, it made me laugh quite a bit. Yeah, go check it out. I don't think it's been on a ton of people's radar. I think it pretty quickly moved out of the top 10 slots for TV shows over on Netflix. Smoke's on a Sisterhood. Now, this is another one that's out in Swiss theaters, but it will be on VOD on January 23rd. So you can bookmark it right now and go see it then. A documentary about women in a sauna. They're talking about their lives. And that's basically the whole film. And it's very intriguing. I think it's super well made and really captivating, even in its own simplicity. And then finally, Origin, Ava DuVernay's latest film, adapted of Isabel Wilkerson's Pulitzer Prize-winning book of the same name. I guess cast Origins of Our Discontents. I haven't really made my way fully through this one, but it basically adapts this thesis into a feature film about how Isabel Wilkerson writes it. And I think it's like darn intriguing. It's been quite overlooked by a ton of people, and I don't really know why. I know some people really didn't like it. I loved it. I thought it was great. But yeah, go seek it out if you can. It goes into wide release in the States right now, and hopefully we'll get a digital release sooner than later. That's it for this week. I'm sorry if I was low energy, of this episode was a bit more jumbled than the rest, but I'm fighting through a sickness right now. Hopefully I'm better by next week. But thanks so much for tuning in. Let me know what you've been watching, and I'll see you next week.